Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this is a show where I review all the comics I've read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week and everything in between, and before I get started, we do talk about the viewer's pick of the week at the end of the video, so in the comments below, let me know your pick of the week for a chance to be featured in the next episode. If you can't hear, I am a little under the weather, so bear with me with that, and let's get started. There's 17 books to talk about. This is a giant haul for me. Number 17 for me is X-Men issue 4. This book feels the most like Krakoa and the era before that. It does feel like just a lot of random X-Men together who happen to be on a team together. And there's not a lot of shining moments for those characters. There's a little moment with magic and a chessboard, but other than that, I feel like there's just too many characters and I don't find there to be a reason why they're all together, unlike something like the Exceptional X-Men and Uncanny X-Men. I feel like there is a little bit more character chemistry, and I want that more in this one. I also don't think Ryan Stegman's art really works for this series. I loved his artwork at Spider-Man, and also a darker palette, but with there being so many characters, I just don't think it's his strongest work. So overall, giving this 2 stars, and that is number 17. Moving on to number 16, which is Spider-Man Black Suit in Blood, issue 2. I really loved issue 1, and it really shows these anthologies sometimes just need to be a one-shot and just kind of wipe your hands of it. I don't know if this needs to be a 6-issue anthology. It does feel like it's milking the cow a bit, and this issue felt that way too, where I don't feel like any story was completely necessary. There wasn't anything that really got you in the heart like that first issue did. I feel like the first issue just had a better curated anthology for me. This one, I just feel like it didn't have as much of a voice, and even the artwork I don't think was as strong as that first issue and as awe-inspiring as that first issue. So, I didn't hate it. I thought the stories were okay, but I don't know if, especially when you have 17 books, if this is a necessary pickup. So giving that 2.5 stars, and that is none. I actually think I gave that 2 stars, and that is number 16. Moving on to number 15, another one. Again, when it's a big week, you got to try to cut some stuff out, and that is the Graveyard Club issue 1. This is $10. This is a really, really big book. A lot of the book, honestly, is previews and images of sketches. I would say about this chunk is all not story. The rest is story. The thing I liked about this issue was the art. I really, really loved the YA style of it. I think it fit really well. I like the character designs of the characters. It made me almost convince myself that I liked the characters, but as I read on, I didn't really find myself connecting to anybody or the mystery itself, which made it hard to kind of get into. And then when I saw that the next issue is going to be, I think, April, I'm like, I probably will not remember what this story is. So I do feel like having this be such a big book, I would rather this be a mini-series or just release them issue by issue as a 22-pager instead of having to wait 5 months for that next issue. So overall, giving that one 2.5 stars, and I don't think I'll get that second issue. And that is number 15. Moving on to number 14, which is the Incredible Hulk issue 17. I do think this was a bit stronger than that last arc. I do at least think there's some character movement with Charlie and the Hulk's relationship as he's trying to find Charlie. There's even some Betty conversation here in Bruce's head. But the actual Vegas connection and the villain, I just don't think is as strong. Like, I like the irkiness of it all, but a lot of it just doesn't move very quickly. And we get the point. He's trying to find Charlie, but that's a very point A to point B moment. And yes, there's some harrowing moments here, but not strong enough for me to recommend this issue. I hope that this series picks up a little bit more, because I do feel like the last couple issues has not been as strong as the beginning of this series. So giving that 2.5 stars, and that is number 14. Moving on to number 13. I'm so sad to see this low. I will say I'm going to get the second issue, but The Moon is Following Us, issue 1. It's the Daniel Warren Johnson book, but I will say Riley Rosmo's artwork I've never been a huge fan of, especially like the shapes of their heads. It's not my style. I don't feel like it's Darren Warren Johnson's style either. Kind of like Jorge Corona, who's working on Transformers, I feel like is very similar to Darren Warren Johnson's style. So when they did replace the artist, it's like, okay, I didn't really notice, but with this, it's just a very different style. And a lot of the beginning for me I wasn't as invested in because it felt very D&D-ish, and I'm like, all right, what's going on? I feel like I'm in the middle of the story, but then the issue does hook you at the end where they're actually in this simulator, they're in their daughter's dream, and their daughter is in a coma. So I'm like, okay, you hooked me for the second issue, but I, as a non-D&D player or fan, I just wasn't as interested in the first chunk, especially as someone who didn't love the art style. So overall, giving that 3 stars, and that is number 13. Moving on to number 12, which is Witchblade issue 3, a series I want to love. I like this franchise. I think it's giving you enough information to understand the franchise, but I don't think it's giving you enough information to love it. I feel like a lot of the issue is just exposition to tell you who she is without feeling her character and feeling the interactions. She's kind of just explaining who everybody is around her without getting good conversations between them to kind of suck you into the story. The artwork is solid enough, feels very 90s, feels very similar to what the series was. And I'm curious for people who are like hardcore Witchblade fans, does it just feel repetitive? That's one thing I worry about, it being a reboot. But then, you know, I've read Witchblade in the past, but I'm not like wasn't the hugest fan, so I didn't read every issue ever. So for me, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of learning a little bit more about the world. I do know that the character at the end is connected to the darkness, so maybe that'll bring some layers, but there is something that feels a little surface level about this book. So overall, giving that one 3 stars, and that is number 12. Moving on to number 11, a book I got on whim, and that is the Multiversus Collision Detected issue 1. The reason I got it, I'm a huge Brian Q. Miller fan, so when I see his name attached to anything, I'm gonna get it. I've never played this video game, so I wasn't as invested in the actual story of messages that the characters are getting. I wasn't as invested in that. But I liked the promise of these other Cartoon Network styled and Warner Brothers characters that we're gonna get to see our super friends interact with, like Bugs Bunny, and I think like Steven Universe is supposed to be in here, so I'm curious to see how they're gonna all collide. I think this was more of a setup issue than anything, but I did like Lois and Clark probably the most here. I really enjoyed their conversation. It was a good chunk of the issue. I'm curious to see where it's gonna end up going, so it did give me enough for an issue 2. I did think the artwork is a bit darker than I expected for a bit of a cartoonier all ages book, but you know, we'll see where that ends up taking us in the next issue. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 11. Moving on to number 10, also a series I'm kind of sad to see so low, and that is Wonder Woman issue 13. Love the art. The art was really great, but it does remind me a lot of issues of Batman I didn't really like, where it was so defined on a certain section of a story that it didn't really progress anything else. And most of that is just the gushiness of Steve and Wonder Woman, and you know, great. I love seeing their romance, but it was mostly just them making out the whole issue. And the rest of it is just Damian and them trying to go into Amanda Waller's stuff, you know, the whole Absolute Power tie-in aspect of it all. Again, art was good. I don't love Absolute Power, so I'm not as interested in the tie-in, and I think the Steve and Wonder Woman story could have been a little stronger. So overall, giving that 3 stars, and that is number 10. Moving on to number 9, a book I just added to the pull list, and that is Deadpool issue 6. Been hearing a lot of good stuff about it. I will say, I do think there's elements that feel a little wordy with this book. I'm also not the biggest hardcore Deadpool fan, so there's elements where the humor doesn't really work for me, but I like this found family that's been created here. I like Deadpool's daughter being her own hero. I like Taskmaster's role here. I also enjoy kind of the poking fun of how about this character gets hurt, what happens when they're not in the issues and this other character has to take over. So I did like the fourth wall breaking of those moments. I thought it was a pretty good issue to also just jump in. I've never read this Deadpool run, and it was very, very easy to just kind of jump in and figure out what was going on from there, which really does make a great comic. So overall, giving it 3.5 stars. Want to see where it goes, but it, you know, I wanna love it. We'll see if it gets to that moment for me. Moving on to number 8, which is Lawful issue 4. Another series that is not built for me, but there's something with every issue that makes me want to pick it up, and it moves really well. This issue in particular, everyone's found out our main character has done some bad things because of the monster qualities he has right now. His mother is like, you know what, we were scared of this our whole time, who cares? Then she faints or might have died in the end of the issue, so there's definitely a lot of movement in these issues, and I love the themes. Again, I like this obviously physical theme of oh, you do something wrong, look, you look like a monster now, and all these kind of morally gray characters that are using antidotes so they don't look like monsters to the outside looking in, but they're still doing wrong things, and this idea that you can't be perfect. The artwork really fits for this book as well. Again, it's a book I shouldn't love, but in doesn't fit the genres I usually like, but really works for this. So overall, giving that 3.5 stars, and that was number 8. Moving on to number 7, a book that actually came out last week, that was supposed to come out the week before that, but my comic book store had it this week, and I wanted to talk about it, and that's Dark Empty Void issue 1. I'm a big fan of both the writer and the artist for this book. Actually, I've worked with Chris Sheehan in the past. I just enjoy the character work, where we get to see this girl who's a professor talking about depression, and she's on the outs with her husband. They have to deal with this dark hole situation and this character that comes out of it, and there's some secrets already laid out in this issue, and I just thought the pacing was really well done, the moodiness was well done, and you get into these characters' heads pretty right away. So overall, giving that 3.5 stars. I thought it was a good introduction to the characters, to the world, and it made me want to pick up the next issue. So giving that 3.5 stars, like I said, and that is number 7, I believe. Moving on to number 6, and another week, this actually probably would be in the top 5, because there's a lot of good books out this week, and a lot of books in general, but X Factor issue 2. Another really great issue. I thought this was a very solid one, where we get to see our main character, Havoc. He is with Polaris, and their relationship's on the rocks because they're on different sides of this mutant controversy, where X Factor is working with these humans. They're not great people, and then we get to see Polaris working with this underground mutant group, and they kind of butt heads by the end, where they probably also break up. Maybe Alex is making the wrong decision. There's also some good satire throughout about society, and that Mark Russell does a great job at. And the artwork is always really clean, good facial expressions, and just a really solid second issue to dive into this world. So overall, giving that 4 stars, and that is number 6. Moving on to number 5, which is Superman issue 18. This was a really great Absolute Power tie-in, most likely because Joshua Williamson is writing it. I think he just does a great job at these world-building issues. It made me feel like the Absolute Power I want. Like, I haven't been loving the main event like I told you. I'm not hating it either. I'm obviously picking it up, but it just hasn't really geared my interest as much as I wanted to. With this, I feel like it feels like there's stakes in diving into the Absolute Power idea, all with character work, whereas Zatanna is desperate for magic and desperate to get her identity back, and compares it to Clark, where she's like, you have Clark Kent, you don't need to be Superman. And I thought that was a really great moment that really drives the whole issue, but it also does a good job at progressing the actual series. By the end, you get this Doomsday teaser. So I just thought it was a really solid issue as a Superman book, but then also as an Absolute Power tie-in. So overall, giving that 4 stars, and that is number 5. Number 4 is Dazzler, issue 1. I really thought this was a solid issue as a Dazzler fan. I'm enjoying this new era of X-Men in general, where the human and mutant fight is not so black and white. It's very gray, and we're using the music industry and celebrityness to tell this story of like, okay, there's humans that like Dazzler. They like her music, and can she be a voice to show that mutants are just like everyone else? And obviously you could tie this into anything else that is in actual life as well, minorities, and I really liked that layer. But I would also say this is for Dazzler fans. I'm not saying that new readers won't understand what's going on, but I think those are going to be the people who enjoy it the most, like me. I enjoyed the references to her harder times. I also enjoyed the lightness to this, which really, again, has to do with her role as a celebrity, her role as a musician, and just seeing her use her powers during the concert. Did it blow my mind? No. I do think as a mini-series, I'm still curious to see where it's going to end up going. I don't know if that plot thread really played a part here, but I liked it as a character issue, and I'm enjoying this new era of X-Men. So giving that 4 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, which is Powerpuff Girls, issue 3. I just really like this book. Kelly Thompson's doing a great job at giving the voice of what we enjoyed from that television show and putting it in a modern age. And this issue, we get to see this villain that doesn't matter. He has a number as a name, and the Powerpuff Girls are like, he's just a random villain. He's like, I don't want to be a random villain. I want to be someone with a name. I want to show that I could be a villain that you've never faced and be a new villain and actually break some boundaries here. And I liked it. I thought it was a good way to introduce a new villain and not just use Mojo Jojo or him and actually make a fun story. With good art and again, a good overall theme as well. So giving that 4 stars, and that is number 3. Moving on to number 2, which is a Vault book, Lilith issue 1. I've been really excited for this one. I like a good vampire story, and we get to see this model who's a vampire who just like wants to bite people and kill people. And then she meets this quirky girl and she's like, wow, she's weird. They build the ambiance really well. I'm interested to see where this relationship's gonna go. And I liked it. Gave me enough to want to read issue 2. I thought the artwork was really cool with the whites and the reds. And it's just a cool looking book that hits things that I like in comic books. So giving that 4 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1, which is the Tin Can Society issue 1. This is just a great way to do a debut issue. You get sucked in right away with wonderful artwork. You really get to see those facial expressions, and there's some time that passes. You get to see different character designs that I think worked really well here. It's about this kid who had a disability. He ends up having these friends along the way, where one of the friends we're in the point of view of for most of the issue, and he ends up dying, this guy. But as we go through the issue, we learn he's kind of like this superhero character as well, this Iron Man. So you're like, okay, there's a reason why maybe someone wants to kill him. But the mystery is it's probably someone who was his friend from the past that killed him, and what's the reason why. I just thought that the way they unraveled information was really well done, and you get sucked into this ambiance and this ensemble very well, where I feel like not all ensemble books are able to do. Honestly, I'll compare it to that Graveyard Shift book where we get a lot of characters. We're like, okay, should I like this person? How do I like this person? And this book does an expert job at having that narrator. You get sucked in right away with her, and then as she gives you information about the other characters and conversation and dialogue between those characters throughout the issue, you're like, well, now I want to learn more about them, but I feel like I know enough where I could care about these characters, all with some wonderful artwork. So overall, giving that 4.5 stars, I was really pleasantly surprised by this book. I didn't know what to expect, but I really enjoyed it. I also enjoyed the disability conversation here as well. Definitely check this one out. I don't think you should make it slip under your radar. So I'm going to give that 4.5 stars. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Let me know in the comments below what your pick of the week was, and the viewer's pick of the week from last week was Uncanny X-Men issue 2, and here are some comments about that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.